Ohio. The Dayton-based artist got so tired of people telling him they were not registering because their vote doesn't count that he made a viral rap video breaking down why it's important, especially in local elections. He posted his crash course on civics on YouTube and got a huge response. So far, it's had nearly 2 million views.
And I've been getting a lot of young people saying like, hey, thank you, I'm gonna go vote now. But what really surprised me is the people that are 70, 80, that are telling me like, I never knew this stuff. I can't believe I never knew this. And it goes to show how big of a gap it is between like a lot of everyday citizens in politics.
When the pimp's in the crib, ma, drop it like it's hot.
Snoop Dogg joins A-list celebrities like Kerry Washington and stars of Broadway musicals and Rock the Votes campaign across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. The Drop It Like It's Hot rapper is voting for the first time in his life after learning past criminal charges don't necessarily ban you from eligibility. Getting information out is key, so Rock the Vote has added extra sections to its website to explain the voting process and answer the hundreds of direct message questions they get every week.
We have a graphic out right now that lists every single state, their registration deadline, their absentee ballot deadlines, when you should postmark it. We really pride ourselves in making sure we are the trusted resource, as we do have a huge following across all of our social media platforms.
When you open up your social media accounts, it's hard to miss the register to vote message. Because of the pandemic, the tradition of voting in person is being drastically altered. More people are looking to vote by mail. Some states are already dealing with legal challenges about their methods. Delays and complications are to be expected, says political strategist Basil Smikle.
Across the country, our system, our infrastructure to vote is just not well funded and really hasn't been able to meet the needs of this moment.
So what impact will this have on voter turnout? Let's find out what our panel has to say. Joining me is Michael Oliva. He's a political consultant and president of Sykes Global Communications. Michael, great to have you with us.
Thank you.
Also joining us is Basil Smikle. He's a political strategist and lecturer at Columbia University. Basil, great to have you with us.
Always a pleasure to see you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Also joining us is Yellow Pain. He's a hip hop artist from Dayton, Ohio. And he did a viral video and now has another video out about the election, about people's conceptions and misconceptions about voting. And we're going to find out all about that in just a moment. Michael, I want to start with you on this. What do you feel the mood of voters just in general is? Are people energized, or are people kind of overdosed already on politics?
Well, first, I'd like to thank Yellow Pain, because he may have single-handedly brought civics back to our public schools. It was a great video. I really feel like what you're starting to see around the country is there's already been significant turnout in the mail-in voting. You saw it here in New York. We weren't sure what was going to happen amidst the the coronavirus epidemic, and these mail-in ballots just really started to flow in. I mean, and these are Democratic primaries for the most part in the city and downstate. So, what we thought may have actually suppressed the vote may actually have inspired people to vote more, even though it's not your atypical showing up to the polls type voting. But what I also think you're seeing is, if you look at states like Pennsylvania, some other states, there's already been some legal action on the side of the Republican Party to sort of be very strict about how these votes are counted when they're mailed in.
And I want to get into that in just a moment. Let me just get a comment from everybody. Basil, in terms of how people are feeling, what do you like? Do you compare this to anything? Are we kind of in an unprecedented place, or where are we at really?
No, we are in a very unprecedented place. There is a tremendous amount of energy on the ground. You have, and it's not just around Joe Biden, though that's important, right? It's about the Democratic ticket, but it's also about people's concerns that there are significant efforts on the right to tamp down on their vote, to tamp down on enthusiasm, and to engage in various types of voter intimidation. So there's this sort of extra effort being put forward by communities, by organizations, whether they be democratic or nonpartisan, to make sure that people have a plan. And in fact, when I go out and talk to people about voting, I don't just say go out and vote. I say have a plan for how you're going to vote. And because you've heard that sort of mantra being repeated over and over and over again, folks are much more concerned and careful about what they're going to do in this election cycle. So there's both a lot of energy and a lot of education around what's happening in November.
And you talk about education. Yellow Pain, what motivated you to do that video that now has nearly 2 million views on YouTube? My vote don't count.
Most definitely. So my cousin, Desiree Timms, who's running for Congress in the 10th District of Ohio, my cousin, she told me, well, she asked me to actually make a song about voting. And I was like, cuz I'm cool. Like, I don't really get into politics. I wasn't into politics whatsoever. And I kind of declined. And she was like, why aren't you into politics? And she broke it down to me and explained to me how politics affect our everyday lives. And over the course of 2 to 3 months of her just, really telling me all the details of how the system works, I really woke up to it. And I was like, wow, so you mean to tell me that majority of the problems that we have in our community are, because we don't vote, or that they can be fixed and changed just from us showing up to vote, but we don't. And it's like, we don't have faith in the system, and we actually are a part of the system, like it's a democracy. And now that I understand that, I'm passionate, to be a part of something revolutionary.
No, it is. And it really got the message out there and was very educational. I was like, wow, I never heard it explained that clearly before. Michael, in the video, Yellow Pain makes the point about, we focus a lot, as of course we are, in 2020 on the presidential, who's going to be in the White House. But the real issue, the real place, the real elections that count are the local elections for our local city and our local state officials. Is that true? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, what's interesting is that in a lot of these swing states, which are many times determined by what happens in the suburbs, the suburbs of Philly, Northern Virginia, Detroit, the middle of Florida, the corridor there. There are also, these are the places where there are also competitive congressional races because they're swing districts, right? Like Yellow Pain said, the Congress is so essential in who actually makes the laws. People said, well, Obama didn't do this, Obama didn't do that. And a lot of it had to do with what the Congress had the power to do. And we tend to think, when we think federally of the presidency, but there's so much more that when we vote, it not only determines, don't think, oh, I'm in New York, the Democrats going to win, don't vote. No, there are multi-levels of races that will ultimately help determine the outcome and the future of the nation.
Definitely. Basil, in terms of the importance of the local races, do you feel that sometimes it gets lost? Because those are the things that are affecting a lot of the issues in our daily lives.
I do think it gets lost sometimes. I mean, to Michael's point earlier, a lot of people focus on the presidential race, and it's important. Congressional races, Senate races, extremely important. And in fact, the Senate races, US Senate races are very important because in many ways, those determine who gets to sit on the Supreme Court, for example, which we're dealing with now. But if you think about local races, state legislative races, city council races, town council races, those state and local legislative seats, those people have the most impact on your day-to-day lives. But unfortunately, those are the races where we have some of the lowest turnout. And we, a lot of us go out and try to talk to folks about how important it is to vote in those local races, those state legislative races, because those are people that are making decisions about education policy, criminal justice reform, healthcare. Yes, there's a lot that comes from the federal government, but so much more that comes at the state and local level.
Yellow Pain, what do you think of the energy that we saw this summer? People, the Black Lives Matter protests, hundreds of thousands of people around the country, many young people, a lot of people from the hip hop culture participating in that. In terms of that energy, do you see people who marched now being motivated and energized to vote? Or do you think that the skepticism is kind of keeping them like, wait a minute, I'm not going to get involved in that?
Well, I mean, the thing is, it's a lot of misconceptions about voting and about the system and how it works. So, people are, afraid of the system, you know what I mean? And it's a lot of misinformation, and a lot of people, kind of got this like, I hate the government type of thing because they aren't changing the laws fast enough. They aren't getting things done that we want done in the community. And a lot of people are turning away from it. But I really think that it's a lot of what's that word? I guess just more so a lot of energy around just change in the world, and I think it's. I'm not sure if people are necessarily excited or not excited about voting, but I definitely think that we have a responsibility to make that connection with the community, with everybody, and let them know that if we want this to change, if we want this to change this year, next year, and for the future of our children and children's children, we have to participate in the real, in the real change, because Martin Luther King, they protested, and that's, kind of where we get the blueprint from. But they also protested all the way to the polls. You know what I mean? So we have to make sure that we follow the full guideline, the full blueprint. And that's kind of my position in it right now.
Will all the messaging translate into turnout? That's coming up. Basil, in terms of the social media impact, we saw National Voter Registration Day. You could not log on anywhere, open a device, check any social media platform without having that get registered to vote message right in your face. How effective do you think that is?
Well, it's very effective, because one of the things, and I think Yellow Pain picked up on this and Mike has talked about this, that there's just a need for more information, right? How do I register to vote? Where can I go vote? When can I go vote? All of those things are very, very important. And there's something that I think is really critical for us to understand. There's no national standard in terms of voting, right? States determine this themselves. The Constitution is very clear about that. So state by state, you can have different rules depending on where you live. So it is very important that, our leaders, and with social media, have the ability to tell people where they're at, how they can go vote, how they can sign up, how they can register. That's very critical. I would also say that social media kind of small d democratizes the process. So you don't have to worry or be concerned about a specific leader saying you have to come out and do this. You've seen, particularly with the Black Lives Matter movement, that young people, wherever they are, whoever they are kind of initiating the protests, initiating the marches, initiating the conversations. So there's no waiting around for anybody to do that. You can just feel motivated to do it and go get it done. And that's the real jewel that social media has really given us. It's democratizing the process. Everyone becomes a leader of the movement.
Michael, in terms of the social media impact, what's your impression of how important that is, or how insignificant it is?
I think we have to remember that social media is often the aggregate of what's happening in traditional media, right? So in many ways, whatever you're looking for is reinforced. So as far as voting goes, I think it has more to do with what you're seeing and what's motivating you personally. I'm not so sure everybody telling everybody to go out and vote on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter is necessarily going to get people to vote. But what I think that the many activists in these movements have to keep in mind is the silent majority tends to speak in elections. I mean, you go back to 1968 and all the civil unrest and all the protests with civil rights and anti-war protests, and then, Nixon wins the election. And so all the activism and all the protests and it's so important because it's about a long game. In the short term, those folks have to get to the polls, and that's why it's so important. The protest is one step, but you want to exist outside the system, but you also want to exist within the system. You have to
like Yellow Pain said, to kind of take that action and turn it into some kind of consequences.
Absolutely. Take that inertia into the polls.
Exactly. Yellow Pain, what kind of reaction have you been getting to the video?
It's been amazing, to be honest. And it's been a lot of celebrities reposting it, et cetera. And, that's amazing. But more so specifically to voters, I made the song for people like me, young people who don't really know nothing about politics, and we think that don't matter, that don't affect my everyday life. The president never did nothing for me, and that's who I made the song for. And I've been getting a lot of young people saying like, hey, thank you, I'm gonna go vote now. But what really surprised me is the people that are 70, 80, that are telling me like, I never knew this stuff. I can't believe I never knew this. And it goes to show how big of a gap it is between like a lot of everyday citizens in politics. So, you know, I'm glad that I was able to do that, and hopefully we can keep it going.
We have much more coming up. Stay with us. Basil, in terms of the complicated nature of voting, because there's the deadline that you have to be registered by that deadline in order to actually vote, then the whole mail-in thing, then do they mail a ballot to you and then you mail it back? What do you think about the information that's just going out in general?
Well, it's tough because not every state does mail-in voting well. And in New York, we actually don't have a mail-in voting process. We have an absentee ballot process, which has just been expanded for this election. So yes, it is a little tricky. You have to ask for your absentee ballot. It has to be mailed back to you, and then you have to actually then mail it back. It's a different process and an easier process than we had before, but it still requires multiple steps that we have to pay a lot of attention to. I'm going to say, you know, I requested an absentee ballot for the June primaries here in New York, and I still haven't gotten my ballot in the mail from June.
Are
and
you
so
kidding?
I
Wow.
had to, no, so that's what I talk about when I talk about making a plan. I had to say, if I don't get this ballot by a certain time, I'm going to have to make sure that I go in and cast my ballot in person. There are a lot of opportunities and ways that this can get messed up, which is why I always say, make sure you have a plan to vote.
That's what all three of you have been saying. Michael, in terms of the whole mail-in ballot, and for some states have done it, I guess the more rural states have done this more regularly or more often, and just how they're ramping up for it. How confident are you that it's going to be done smoothly?
Well, I mean, even if you look at New York City this past primary in June, there was a significant amount of chaos. There were several lawsuits. Democrats against Democrats. Some people argued that the ballot needed to be signed. Some people argued that it didn't. If you remember back to the Bush-Gore election, that was just a few votes in one state that were under scrutiny, and it took a few months, and it had to go through the U.S. Supreme Court for the decision to finally be made. We can have a potential situation here where there are upwards of 25 states who are arguing over ballot processes and which ballots counts and which don't. And both parties have very good lawyers, and they're going to work very hard to try to secure those elections. And you could see this potentially, we could not know who the next president is in January.
Wow, that's incredible. Yellow Paint, in terms of the issues that the people that were marching, all the hundreds of thousands of people marching for Black Lives Matter and against police brutality and the abuses and for George Floyd, that energy, those issues, what do you see are the top issues that would motivate people to go, who were protesting, who were marching, to actually go through this voter registration and casting a ballot process?
Yeah, I definitely think, obviously the judges, we have judges that are not convicting police officers for different reasons. And I know it's laws and, stuff in the Constitution that, that makes that a difficult process anyway. But even outside of that, I definitely think people, will want to know that they have the option to elect new judges to change those people out. And then there's the part of the song where I say, imagine life on the other side. Roads better, schools better, everybody get their license back, grocery store food better, custody of your kids back, homeless people get new shelters. You know what I mean? So I named a lot of different things, and those are everyday issues that we deal with. And I think if people knew that those everyday issues can be changed by voting, then a lot more people will show up.